Shalom and welcome to HomeBound Israel. I'm very happy to host with us today Marc Reiss. Marc, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Great to hear that, especially in these days. Marc, could you share with our listeners a little bit about your professional banker, because you have an amazing career?
Wow, amazing career. Thank you for putting it like that. I was born and bred in London.
I couldn't notice your English accent.
Moved to Israel about what turns out to be about 19 years ago, something like that. After studying in university there, in the University College in London, I worked in a French investment bank and learnt all my fundamentals and basics there. And then, I suppose most relevant for this conversation, after several jobs, I then worked for Citigroup, and I was, my final years in Citigroup, I was responsible for their wealth management, their sales and distribution for their wealth management business for Western Europe. And in the last 19 years since coming to Israel, I've been more focused on our particular bank, Mizrahi-Tefahot, where I'm responsible for the foreign resident and the new immigrant business and the people.
That's very important, especially because there are so many people that are considering now to move to Israel following the things that happened in October 7th. So I would like to ask you two questions with your permission. One, could you share with us your vision, oversight about the stability of the economy of the state of Israel?
Okay, first of all, it's very interesting that you say that. There has been more demand since October the 7th, and it's not just from an Israel perspective. It's a very unusual place. You know, as I said before, my previous career was focused on, I suppose, not a particular Jewish segment, pretty much the Western European markets. And coming here, I've been focused now on very much the Jewish diaspora around the world. And there's always been a demand to come to Israel for many reasons. You shouldn't think for a second that people are coming here because they're frightened of things abroad, necessarily. Yeah, because it's a difficult time abroad as well. We're seeing polarization all over the place, whether it's in Europe, we're seeing whether it's in America, whether it's in the UK now. In the most recent elections in France, we can see all of these issues arising, and it's a difficult time. But people have always come to Israel because Israel has been very, very attractive to the high-tech world here, the possibility of employment here, the long-term career paths for people that have a specific added value, maybe because of their English. Remember, this is a small country.
So it's very positive indicators.
Oh no, there's very positive indicators. I'll give you a few, for example. On October the 8th or the 9th, the dollar was about, if I remember rightly, about 4.1. Today it's about 3.65, 3.7. It's an increase of about 10% since the beginning of the war. During this period of time, there was one or two rating agencies that have put downgraded Israel. And yet at the same time, when the Treasury wanted to recruit and raise money from the markets, they wanted to raise $8 billion a couple of months ago. It was oversubscribed almost 400% by 400 investors from 36 different countries trying to participate in this issue with $36.5 billion. Wow. In other words, there's a nice old expression in English, putting your money where your mouth is. And we're seeing people who have a long-term faith in Israel. There's also a couple of other things. You have to compare where we are now with other parts of the world. You know, our GDP, we're a tiny country. Yeah.
Could you please elaborate also about the market in the United States? Because, you know, this is one of the markets that people are moving from United States to Israel. So that's very important to look what is happening in their economy versus our economy.
I'll be honest, I'm not a specialist in the markets in the United States, but what I will say is this, that like the United States economy is, to the best of my knowledge, about $25 trillion. It's massive. There's no economy. It's followed soon after by China. The Israeli economy is about $560 billion. This is GDP. Yeah.
Wow.
A billion. This is a 2.5 trillion shekel economy. It's massive. But out of 200 to 203 countries in the world, that's around number 25, 26. But GDP per capita, in other words, the products, the services, the value generated by the population here in Israel, is around $58,000, which is around number 13 or 14 in the world. Now, when you compare that,
so that put us in which other countries?
We're absolutely within all the developed world, better than most of Europe.
Wow.
So we're well up there with the best. But what's important to remember here is, and this is why I think Israel is so attractive, we are around 0.18% of the world as the amount, or as Jews, as it were. That's all we are, around 15 million, 16 million out of a population of about 8 billion. So it's 0.18%, but as a country, we're number 13 or 14 as GDP per capita. In other words, the product, service, value generated by this country. This is the land of the future, and that's why people see it's attractive to come here, irrespective of the war. Another thing...
Listen, what you're saying is very, very outstanding.
Well, it's true. There's various other indicators as well. You know, debt of a country as a proportion of its GDP. Israel's always been around 58, 60%, something like that. Since the war started, we're leading up to 70%, and it sounds like, wow, that's going high. But if you compare that to other countries, this is, again, incredible compared to other European countries. I can't remember offhand now. 80%, 90%, America's well over 100%. These are incredible figures. So there's even a cushion there for allowing for the terrible circumstances which we currently find ourselves in and imposed upon us, for us to get out and, please God, find ourselves in an even stronger position to continue. And that's probably the main driver, from my experience, as to why so many Jews around the world want to come to Israel. Not because they're necessarily frightened where they are, even though it is getting more
because
challenging.
They trust the economy.
Because Israel is strong, and Israel is not just as an economy, but as a society. The difference here is as well is that we don't have the luxury of sticking our heads in the sand. Right. You know, you can pretend that things aren't happening in other parts of the world, but here in Israel, we can't pretend they're not happening, and we have to face them. And from that comes a lot of meaning too. So therefore, it's not just the economy, it's from a social perspective as well.
It's the strength of the society. Wow, thank you so much. And I want to go back a little bit to your personal background, because you moved here, so you understand the difficulties, the challenges, that people are asking themselves when they want to buy an apartment or a house in Israel. So you can actually help us navigate through some of the decisions they need to ask themselves, to what should be their first steps in doing so when they want to start the process.
You mean, what's the process of buying a property in Israel for someone that's coming to Israel?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, these are big decisions.
Of course.
And it seems to me that, first of all, it's the same principles as people from abroad. You've got to look at the location. You've got to find a community. You've got to find where you're comfortable. Also, it's very important to know where you're coming from a lifestyle perspective. In other words, are you a retiree? Are you looking for a job? Are you a young married? Are you going to be looking for a community which is suited for retirees and past professionals, or young professionals who are looking to build a home? So once you've done that, it seems to me that once you know which segment you fit in, then you either hire the right professional to help you look, if you're still abroad before you've looked, or you come to Israel first, you rent for a couple of years and then you decide, or you come on various pilot trips, and then you can make those decisions. Because buying a property in Israel is not cheap. Buying a property anywhere in the world is not cheap. To many people, it's their biggest investment.
But if you would have to help guide someone from the financial perspective, because people are asking themselves, okay, I can go to the bank, I can go to a private, investor. How would they start their first steps? What should be the do, must not do in order to avoid any complications?
Well, there's no questions here. The banks are probably the single biggest relationship and most important relationship of someone that moves to Israel. The bank is involved in everything. Receiving rent, receiving wages, receiving social security, making payments, the ability to pay by debit cards or credit cards and things like that. So one needs a bank for everything here, even to receive the Oleh Hadash package, you need a bank. But if someone's prior to that, specifically for a mortgage now, there are many mortgage advisors on the market too. And many of them provide significant added value. The added value, especially for someone from abroad, who can help them with exactly these things: where to look, what to look for, what type of mortgage might be suitable to the person who they are speaking to. Now, for example, and again, this is either a mortgage advisor or within the bank now.
So they can go either to a mortgage advisor or go directly to a bank?
The mortgage advisor will work with the bank in any case. So the banks are always going to be part of that picture. What our job is to make sure that the person who is sitting in front of us matches their needs. Now, many people will say, do you know, I don't need a mortgage. I'm going to sell my house in London, or I'll sell my house in New York or wherever I come from, and I'll just buy it from there. But the problem is that you're talking from one currency to another currency. Here we live in shekels. There it's dollars, sterling, wherever you come from. So, and some people have significant savings as well. Now, when you're going to put down for a house or an apartment, some might think, do you know what? The economy is not that good. I think the dollar will be stronger in 10 years, or I think the pound will be stronger after these elections and when the ideas of the European Union and Brexit become more clear and things like that. And therefore, they might not want to use their hard-earned foreign currency, which they've amassed through their life, now. So instead, they can mitigate that and take a mortgage, and that means they're not using all of their money, and they would pay it off when, or if they believe, things get better regarding the currency that they hold. That's one reason as well to take a mortgage. It's not just about whether you need the money. It might be that you have a view on something else. There's many reasons that someone might want to take a mortgage. The most important thing is, not just from the side of a bank or any professional here, but also from the side of the client, is to understand who is sitting in front of you and to match your needs. So even within the mortgage, there's a client.
It can be matched specifically to the need of the client.
Not a particular client, but of a segment of clients.
Of clients.
I mean, maybe to a particular client in some nuance, in some way.
Of course.
But to a segment. And what I mean by that is the differences between a mortgage in Israel and abroad can be quite significant.
Okay, please elaborate on that. It's important.
So, for example, in some countries, you take a mortgage for 5 years and you renew it every 5 years, for example. In Israel, you take a mortgage, it's from up to 25 years, perhaps even 30 years sometimes. You can take a mortgage up to the age of 80, 85. There's various considerations to be taken there. And there's various Bank of Israel directives. So, for example, the Bank of Israel directive is that for a foreign resident, you can get up to 50% financing. For an Israeli or an Oleh Hadash with a Tudat Zahut, an ID number, there is a concession. They can get up to 75%.
And that's a big difference.
It's a big difference. Not everyone utilizes that massive difference. Not everyone needs the whole amount.
By the way, is there an age restriction?
Yeah, there is. The age limit is, I think, 80 to 85.
Okay.
So when I say before you can take a mortgage for 25 to 30 years, it's whatever comes first. In other words, you either reach the age cap, or so if you take a mortgage at 70, then you'll have 15 years left to go, something like that. There is also the idea of, and these are good regulations, by the way. In other words, they're there to ensure that people don't take on too much debt and that they live their lives well. So, for example, the Bank of Israel has a directive that up to 40% of someone's total global income, that's the total amount that can be used to pay for a mortgage. So if I'm earning, for example, 10,000 shekels a month, the maximum after tax, the maximum I can pay on a mortgage is 4,000 shekels a month.
Because we want to take care of our clients and customers.
Well, that's a Bank of Israel directive.
Of course,
but it does have the same impact,
I want you to share with our listeners, because we can always learn from stories of people. From your experience, can you share like a good story and a bad story so we can learn from that experience, of what people did and maybe they made a mistakes, of course, because they didn't know enough about the facts or how to approach it?
Okay, I think In many ways, it's the same vein as I said in a previous question. It's all about knowing who you are and what your needs are and what you need to do with it. So I'll give you an example of a mistake, for example, and I'll use myself as an example. You know, when I moved to Israel from England, and this is now almost 18, 19 years ago, the pound against the shekel was around 8 shekels to the pound.
I remember that
Maybe
time.
even 8.4, something like that. Had I then looked ahead as to where I was going, not where I've come from, because there's a home bias with everybody. Had I then changed much more of my sterling to shekels even then, I'd be in a different position now. Today it's about 4.5 shekels to the pound then. These are common mistakes that people can make, and they're not helped also by professionals abroad. This is the beauty of really appreciating the Israeli banking system.
Because you said people are looking more on the short terms rather than looking at the medium long term.
It's not just that. Everyone
Okay.
has a home bias. So you think, oh, I'm going to have to hold on my dollars because it's always going to be strong, or my pounds, or my euro, or whatever it is. But people forget sometimes that if their obligations in the future are going to be in a new currency, you've got to think of that too. So it doesn't matter what the pound is worth against the shekel in many ways, but it does if I have to buy something in shekels years later. And therefore, that would have been prudent, for example, to change more pounds to shekels, invest it locally, use it for whatever I needed at the time, or prepare accordingly, and I would have had double the amount of shekels than I would get now. Of course, it can go either way, but the point is to look ahead where you're going. And this is the pitfall of relying on the professionals from where you've come from as opposed to where you're going. When you look at the professionals, whether it's the mortgage workers, the mortgage advisors, the mortgage professionals in the bankers within the bank, their job is to see who is sitting opposite them and where they're going with this and where you're going from now. And they'll give you advice accordingly. Professionals from abroad will try and hold on,
Of course.
and encourage that home bias. That would be a mistake that we see on and on. I'll give you another example of things, for example, which people could see as being a negative, but it turns out to be a positive. In order to understand the differences between the banking system in Israel and abroad, there are significant differences. For example, even in the mortgage world or in the banking world, the idea of a cottage. You know, everyone knows, I'll buy a cottage here or an apartment. Where I come from, a cottage, you know, brings up the visual, certainly in my brain, of a beautiful detached house with a little river.
With a little garden.
Yeah, with a little garden and a river flowing at the bottom here. Here, a cottage is a semi-detached house. And it's important. There's many different nuances like that.
Of course.
One of the issues people have, for example, is life insurance. Here in Israel, we demand that, by and large, that for a mortgage, you take life insurance. And some people have a problem with that, because they say it's not quite like that abroad. Abroad, well, you've got the property, the bank's got the lien and the pledge. What does it need this for? You need to see once a widower or a widow thanking the banker for making them take the life insurance, and then leaving their wife or their husband with a full property without having to sell it. You need to see that just once, and then you realize the value and how important the local priorities are here.
I think people need to understand that sometimes those differences actually are playing in their favor.
Absolutely.
Rather than actually trying to harm them. I want to please share with us some of your statistics numbers. Is there a growth? Do you feel that there is a growth in new immigrants, of course, after COVID, but also now after October 7, or people who are moving to Israel, and how many people there's increased for demand in, approaching you as a banker
Okay,
to deal with their accounts?
There's always been a healthy move and direction to Israel, whether it's from people from a Zionist perspective, from a professional perspective. There's opportunities in Israel. There's always been that. Without a doubt, we saw things during COVID which we hadn't seen before. COVID highlighted something which, for the first time, everyone has always seen Israel as a safe haven, and it's always been a safe haven, actually. For the first time in thousands of years, we have a safe haven here in this land for the Jews around the world. That's its raison d'être. In COVID, people saw for the first time that if they didn't have an Israeli passport, that they couldn't come in. And that actually impacted people. And what we saw
Very
then was that there was a demand, or certainly an enhanced interest in moving to Israel, and there was an enhanced interest in making Aliyah, but maybe for some on paper, to get the Israeli passport. But it changed, actually. It changed the paradigm to a certain extent, that people saw, well, maybe I do need to take Israel and the actual preparation of where I want to be in the future a little bit more seriously. That was from one perspective. There's also no doubt that in the last 6 months, which is again one of the last 8-9 months actually, that we have seen a stronger demand of people looking into coming to Israel. Now we can see that in the numbers too. My understanding is the amount of portfolios, tikim, the amount of files opened with the Jewish Agency, is in the hundreds of percent increased, whether it's from France, whether it's from America, and probably most areas around the world.
Do you also feel it as a banker, the amount of accounts that are being opened under your supervision?
I don't necessarily see it. Remember,
Okay.
it's at this moment in time, it's actually difficult. A lot of the airlines aren't coming here at the
Right.
moment. So, and you need to be face-to-face in Israel in order to open an account. But I do...
Can you do it also through a lawyer?
There are abilities. There are on
There
a
are
case-by-case
liabilities.
basis.
Okay.
There are on a
So that's
case-by-case
important.
basis. There are other procedures which could work. But by and large, you have to be face-to-face in Israel to open an account. And so it's difficult for people to come now. But in terms of interest from everywhere around the world, yes, we are seeing that because people are seeing it really as that safe haven. But again, I have to stress, not just a safe haven. The unemployment rate in Israel today is 4%. Yeah, despite everything, or maybe 4 to 5% now, because remember, there's a lot of people in Miluim. You know, in Europe, many of the countries are 7 to 8 to 9%. In many of the developing countries around the world, it's much, much higher than that. This is
In
a
the
place,
UK, for example?
I don't have that
Oh,
figure
okay.
on me at the moment, so I don't want to
Right.
come up with something
Yeah.
which is inaccurate. But I can tell you this, that if I remember rightly, the demographics here speak volumes as well. In Europe, between the ages of 0 to 14, it's about 11% of the population. Between the ages of 14 to 65, it's about 65% of the population. And over the age of 65, it's about 27% of the population. In Israel, it's exactly the opposite. The 14 years and below is about 27%. Between 14 and 65 is about 65%, and then 11% the rest, from 65 onwards. This country will have no actuarial problem going ahead. And it's a growing country with a young professional workforce. And this is the reason why people want to come here.
So, Mark, when someone want to move to Israel, in order to have a soft landing, even, preparation, so what they should do, what should be expected from the Israel banking system? Are there things that they can do previous to their face-to-face meeting with the clerks in the bank?
Okay, I want to get to that. In general, though, first, someone who is preparing to move to Israel, whether it's immediately or whether it's in the medium term, which could be a couple of years, even further along, there are certain things that they can do, which again is preparing themselves more. There's a lot of knowledge out. You can find things on the internet. You can, all you have to do is Google ChatGPT. You can find things whenever you want. Yeah. They must realize that by coming to a professional financial institution in Israel, that they should expect wisdom and not knowledge. That's the difference.
Wow, that's very
As
important.
a result, they should expect to look for things in terms of what provides them with value and not necessarily compare with the price. They should look for someone that can empathize with them and not sympathize with them. What that means is, if, for example, someone sitting opposite them from the professional institution that they're working with has come from the same place that they have come from, or is also a past Ole Chadash, then we don't have to sympathize with the client. We know the client, we are the client, and that allows us to empathize with them. And that's probably the critical piece in looking for where you want to work with. Find someone that you feel knows who you are and knows and will help you sleep better at night. Remember, there's always been two types of clients: those that want to live well and those that want to sleep well. It doesn't mean anyone is better or worse. It just means that there are different types of priorities. And there are also those that see banking as a product, whereas there are institutions who see banking as a service which needs to be matched to the client's needs. Now, why am I saying to you all this? And therefore, instead of, for example...
No, that's very important values for one to consider when, they are doing businesses here.
Yeah, so for example, there'll be many places which will be pushing, the prevalent products of the day and things like that. A good institution will not be doing that. We'll be looking for a relevant product of the day. And the relevant means relevant for the person sitting opposite the banker. And the client's responsibility is to find that. So as an example, yes, you can and you must open up an account face-to-face in Israel. But for someone preparing their aliyah, for someone that can't get over, and they have a lawyer, for example, who is going to represent them in buying their property, there are ways to give the lawyer power of attorney. I'm only going to give this in a general case now, but there are ways, and that's why it's all case by case. There are ways to give the lawyer power of attorney. There'll be certain things which can be signed by him, one or two things which still will have to be signed by the ultimate client. But there are ways which matches each person's specific needs, all within the regulatory and compliant environment, which, by the way, we haven't mentioned yet, but the idea of compliance and regulation is something which is profoundly important. And there is no compromise on any of these issues from any professional that one would work with, and certainly from any bank that you would work with. There can be no compromise, and ultimately it is not meant to make the life of the client difficult. It is actually meant to protect the life of the client. You do not want to be working with a Mickey Mouse institution, which does not have respect, whatever it is, which does not have respect for the local and any relevant compliant directive or regulation or regulatory authority. And that is the importance of the preparation for someone who's going to move to Israel, to find the right organization to work with, to find the person that keeps them and gives them the feeling that there is a sense of empathy with them and not sympathy, and that they know where they're coming from, and then they'd be prepared to pay for the value they receive as opposed to the price that they're being charged. It's very important to realize that everything that we've spoken about and everything I've said so far isn't focused at all on any one particular area, any one particular diaspora. It's equally focused on all of the diaspora that have already moved here to Israel. There's a very large and significant part of our population here, whether they come from English-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, whatever their ages, they have difficulty with the languages, and they prefer everything in their home or what they grew up with, in their mother tongue. And therefore, a lot of what we've just said, is very much relevant to them, because they are as important a segment for us as anybody else. So, for example, and many of these people might have been coming and might be here for years and still don't live by the principles that we've just said. They still might have this home bias, still might be holding money abroad, still might be thinking, I still have some foreign currency.
So even though they moved to Israel, actually they are still having a life there and here.
No, very much so. In other words, the idea of searching for a professional in a banking institution that can identify with where you've come from, even though we're living in Israel now as a mother tongue foreign language speaker. Mm-hmm. It's important for them to realize that everything we just said is equally as important for them, and this is a large part of what we're speaking about, because the idea of matching your needs, the idea of keeping or helping them stay awake at night as well with the fears. And the fears are actually even more enhanced here sometimes locally, as we've spoken about the particular issues in the last 8 months or so. It's very important, and it's even more important for them to look ahead. Their obligations are all going to be, by and large, in shekels now. And therefore, the idea of wherever they've come from, to change that mindset and help them understand and prepare accordingly, whether it's for buying their property, whether it's for renting it, whether it's for helping their children in the future, whether it's for setting out their whatever it is that they need, it's just as relevant for them.
So they don't really actually cut their life.
Absolutely not.
From their origin country, but actually they are continuing, and it's very important that the bank will continue with them while they are settled in Israel, but also take in consideration the fact that they still have assets, whatever obligation in their
Yeah.
original countries.
No one really cuts their life off from where
Okay.
they've come. We all have not just a fondness, but a love for where we are born and what we would consider our home. But as I said, there is a difference between where you've come from and where you're going. And that's critical here.
I want to tell you, Mark, that you are a person that is full of knowledge, but I think the most important in days like that, you gave me a lot of hope. People are looking today at the state of Israel and asking themselves questions. And with you, I felt that there were no question marks. There were actually comfort and secure. And, I think it was very, very well said and addressed. And I really want to thank you. And if there's anything more that you would like to share with us. So the last word is for you.
So I will then. I just want to relate to what you just said. Don't mistake what I'm saying now for meaning that there are no challenges here. There are significant challenges here, and it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time for all of us. We are all watching our children, and there is no family here which wouldn't be touched by the fighting going on around us. I think what I'm trying to say is this is our history, and we have never been so strong. And if we are going to be seeing where there is more hope, and where there is more excitement, and where there is more potential, not just from personal perspectives, but also from an economic perspective, in this difficult and challenging world that we're living in, there is no doubt in my mind, and I think we're seeing that now with many of the communities around the world, there is beginning to be less doubt in their minds that it is here in Israel. It doesn't mean we don't need a strong diaspora, and it doesn't mean we won't work with a strong diaspora. It just means that more and more people will see that Israel is the place of hope for the future.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think, the message that people come here from choice and not because it's something negative that is happening for them. I think that's something that leaves us as a society with a great comfort. So thank you so much. And we're looking forward hosting you again in HomeBound Israel. Have a great day.
Thank you.